Welcome to episode 138 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Mark Carbone. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Mark Carbone. Mark, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your time. It's a pleasure to speak with you, CEO of PN Medical.
Hey, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a really interesting topic. When I first, kind of came across your name and your company, I was like, this breathing thing is something that I talk about often, and it very often gets dismissed. And I'm sure that you've come up against this as well in your career and your time with PN Medical, is that, breathing seems like this overly simplistic thing. We all breathe. Everyone does it. If you're not breathing, you're not alive. And so it's like, well, why would I need help with this? Is that something that you've really come up to, butt against, and something that you're really trying to overcome, is really just letting people know the importance of actual breathing properly?
Yeah, great question. Well, we started this category 44 years ago, the respiratory muscle training category, and ours is actually combined because it's both sides of the breath are different and they do different things, of course. So, being around here this many years with 2 million patients now, there is a lot we've learned. And what I've learned when I took over the company 8.5 years ago now, the company was primarily in the medical space for really severe chronic illnesses, COPD, asthma, stroke, spinal cord injury, all the things that affect the torso, the diaphragm and everything around the thoracic cavity. But then fast forward, I realized, I said, hey, this is good for everybody, because I saw the results that it has for anyone, from age 8 to 98, can benefit, of course, from optimizing the way they breathe, and then using our tools that actually target those, around those 94 muscles of respiration and the 124 around posture. People don't realize you have that many muscles in the body that dictate all that activity. So I said, hey, this is for everyone. And what I realized is that if you're not a pro athlete, or if you're not highly compromised, that your doctor said, listen, you got to do this. I know you can't breathe. You have trouble even standing up and walking for 1 minute. Is that if you don't have a big need, you're not gonna follow through. So what we've learned over the years is that everyone can benefit, and there are some little things that you can do now today, and I'll share some of those today. Some little 1 minute techniques and tactics that you'll instantly feel something by improving the efficiency of how you move oxygen and CO2. And last thing on that is that we need to realize two things, actually. Over 88% of all adults have some form of dysfunctional breathing. We start out as belly breathers, as little children, as babies. And then as we get older, we start breathing higher and higher in the chest and into the shoulders. Well, that causes all kinds of you're hitting the sympathetic nervous system way too much when you're doing that. So that many people, almost the whole world, has some form of dysfunctional breathing that everybody can benefit from learning just a few of these techniques.
I totally agree. One thing that you mentioned there is respiratory muscle training. Now, most people probably don't realize that there is a very mechanical function to breathing. There are muscles that contract and pull and push and move bones and parts of the body that allow air to come in, and that's a very overly simplistic way. My anatomy teachers would slap me in the head for saying it like that, but this is more or less what's going on. Can you, without going into too much anatomical detail, talk a little bit about the mechanics of breathing to help people understand just what is happening? And I think that will kind of set the stage for why breathing training is actually very important and useful to all people, not just people with severe dysfunction.
Yeah, good question. At its basic, let's just start with that gigantic muscle in the body, the diaphragm. It's like a giant parachute, and it sits under the lungs, and it's a regulator on many levels. If we just focus on that, if you can strengthen the diaphragm, a lot of things improve. Besides breathing and besides moving oxygen and CO2 more efficiently, you are going to also affect, like I said, posture. So at its core and at the simple level is that it's belly breathing. You put your hand on your stomach and feel your belly go in and out. It's not like it has to fully distend, but you got to feel that movement and feel the upward movement. And you don't breathe from the shoulders. You just notice, just let your belly go in and out, put your hand on it. And it's about that diaphragm. So the mechanics are, again, at its core, let's just focus on the diaphragm. If we can strengthen and build up the diaphragm, it affects us tremendously. Big improvements just from that.
Right. And so I think just to maybe a little further explain that is like the diaphragm essentially, and you step in and correct me where I'm wrong here, Mark, but the diaphragm is going to expand your lungs. And so it is pulling down on the organs, which are your lungs, and creating more space so that air can go inside them. And that's basically what breathing is. And so if the diaphragm is more efficient at doing that, the same way, you lift a dumbbell, you do bicep curls, like your bicep gets more efficient, the diaphragm is a muscle, all the same. Now you can't lift weights with your diaphragm, obviously, but we'll talk about how to train it, because it's not the traditional strength training doesn't work for your diaphragm, but that is more or less like what's happening and how that gets trained, right? Or how it helped with breathing.
Yeah, and just to give you just a bullet list of what the impact, how important it is for you, and we're talking. Let's not talk highly compromised or at the highest level of Olympics. So the rest of the world is that it affects anxiety. It affects your blood pressure. It has a positive effect on anxiety and blood pressure. It increases overall resilience. If you are athletic, your lactate threshold, you hit that slower, your stamina goes up, affects your VO2 max, your HRV, which, I don't know if everybody's tracking with that now. That is tremendous. If you can control your variable heart rate, it is a predictor of longevity now. So VO2 max, lung capacity, and HRV are amazing predictors of how long you're going to live. And you have to address that. And a better HRV affects sleep. So by working and targeting those muscles of respiration, these are all the things that can positively be impacted.
Right. Now, before we get into discussing how the device works and how to actually go about training our breath, in your opinion, why do you think we start to breathe poorly naturally? No one's teaching us how to breathe right or wrong. We just tend as we get older to start breathing shallow breaths into our chest and our shoulders, and we stop the natural belly breathing. Do you have any idea why we might be doing that?
Well, you take a breath over 20,000 times a day, and it is a great question. There are a number of answers, but again, the simple answer is that no one's technically trained you. So as a child, if you start doing yoga, if you do really good yoga and you follow a yogi that is really strong on breathing, well, you're going to focus on that. You're going to continue to take deeper breaths. We just, as we get older, we hit that shallow breathing. There's stress. When stress hits, anxiety, life hits us. Even at a young age too, you just go into more of a sympathetic state, and you're not in that restorative, you're not in that restorative state. So it's just habit. You habitually keep on breathing in that way. And again, this most simple way is shallow breathing. And notice it when you're checking email. Watch how you breathe when you're checking email. You just start shallow. A lot of people just start shallow breathing. I know some of those emails cause that stress response, but over time we stop. And I know for women, it's always keep that belly in. You don't want to look fat. So I get it. On the female side, whole psychological part of that is that you don't want the belly moving, got to look thin. On the male side, I don't know. I think it's more anxiety driven, and you just continually breathe in that improper function.
That seems to make sense to me, because if I think about there's got to be many factors that are contributing to this. Were we doing this 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 plus years ago, whatever, humans, were they starting to shallow breathe? Or is it also a combination of, because if it was always like that, then it wouldn't really be an issue. Like we would have adapted over time to be like, oh, this is just how we do it and this is okay. But obviously that's not the case. And so it seems to me like it's got to be some multifactorial thing, and we can never, pin our finger on, that's the problem. But it's this multifactorial thing that's really just a cause of like living in 2023 and you're surrounded by big buildings and bombarded by email and, all of the stressors of regular life that cause us to have these shallow breaths, which is almost like a panic hyperventilation response, right? And that's why we're firing up our nervous system so much and so excessively, which is just not good. And so therefore we need to be trained on how to not do that.
Yeah, we're not getting to reset. We are, at least let's talk about where we are, in the developed world, and it's happening in other parts of the world too, is that we're just on too much, everybody's trying to get off the grid. Everybody's trying to unplug. Well, there's a good reason. And there's a good reason why Steve Jobs and all the other and the other guys never let their kids use their iPad or or their smartphones, because it is addictive and it does affect you in really negative ways. It's positive, but there's a lot of negative too.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's not the be all end all to the world. It's a tool, and used correctly, it can do great things, and used incorrectly, it can do bad things, just like any other tool that's ever been invented, right? And we factor in, modern times and what's happened over the past couple of years, high stress, economic stress, the world is in chaos, and like, okay, well, all right, that adds up. I don't know very many people, and I'm in Toronto, and we had very severe lockdowns, and there was a lot going on here, and I don't know many people who didn't suffer from some degree of anxiety and or depression during this time, and that is one of the main things that comes with breathing. And we're not saying that, hey, just do a few breathwork things and your depression is going to be cured. Like, that's not what we're saying. It's just, it's going to be one step in the whole thing. And it's certainly going to help in your process with whatever's going on in your life. And I think that's a fair statement to make.
Yeah. And note that, we're hoping parts of COVID are behind us. Long COVID's not. But it did affect us. The CDC said after COVID, over 20% of the human race is more anxious. So we actually, our baseline has gone up. So we baseline at a more anxious state. Well, that's not healthy. That's not healthy in any way. So it does affect us. Breathing, it's funny. Like I said, we've been around for over 4 decades, and it's like we're a 40-year overnight success. Is that since it hit, it caused an explosion for us because people became aware of it.
Right.
And we were a big part of the solution post-COVID. We did a number of studies. We just finished a long COVID study with 2,000 patients, and we partnered with Mayo Clinic. They ran the study, and the things we learned from that, that there has to be this reset, this autonomic reset. We all have to reset our autonomic system. And we actually got 2 patents. We applied for 2 patents after what we learned from all these patients and all this data. That and what was interesting too is that it humbled me too, because I didn't realize that, we've got these devices that target your respiratory system and really strengthen it much faster than you could do in any other way. But if you for athletics, if you're squatting incorrectly, there is a way to squat right. There's a bunch of different types of way to squat. But if you're doing it wrong, you're going to cause crazy injury, either immediate or long term. Same thing with learning to properly use respiratory muscle training devices, is that you need to reset your breath. We all need a reset. I call it the great reset of breathing, is that we just have to do, it's called a 5-5 routine. And you do it for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 at night. Do it for a week or 2. And you got to reset that autonomic nervous system. Again, since COVID, it affected the entire globe. Okay. Well, we have to go to this reset. So it's just breathe in through the nose for 5, breathe out for 5. Do it for 10 minutes, just sitting still. We have a breather coach app that just coaches you through it, but you can do it yourself right now. You don't fall asleep. You need to stay awake while you're doing it. And it is just resetting that autonomic nervous system to get that breathing pattern back, or for the first time since you were a child, actually get it back for the first time in 30 or 40 years. Again, basic, very basic, just a 5-5 in and, 5 in for 5, out for 5 or 10 minutes a day, twice a day. When you feel, and you'll feel a change. You really will feel a change.
I've loved and used a strategy very similar to that with myself and my clients. Almost all my clients go through a sort of breathing exercise as like a cool down of the workout, which is, essentially box breathing as it's called, right? 4 in, hold for 4, 4 out, hold for 4, and cycle and repeat. And, there's a million ways to slice it up and what's right and wrong and whatever, but it's all kind of getting at the same thing. And one of the biggest responses that I get when I take someone through that for the first time is it's always like this, wow, I didn't know it would be like that. I didn't expect it to be like that. They kind of think I'm this woo-woo guy, like, making me breathe and whatever. Like, we were just squatting and whatever, and now we're just breathing. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't taken a conscious breath in maybe your whole life. And so this is like a really big deal. I say that like somewhat profoundly, but it's actually true. Think of the last time, people listening, when was the last time you took a conscious breath? It's maybe never, for real. And so being able to do that is a huge skill. And just back to the COVID stuff, anecdotally, I'll say for my own self, and speaking on behalf of me, when I had COVID, one of the things, among other things that I did, was a very similar breathing exercise to what you did, or what you were describing, where I was outside breathing in, and luckily I was near an ocean at the time. But I was just breathing in, holding my breath, being very conscious about holding and forcefully exhaling and inhaling, and just really working on that mechanics. Like, hey, I don't want to lose this ability. And have experience with that with my knee and with other injuries in the past, but it was the same kind of thing. It's like, hey, I've got to practice this skill so that I keep it as strong as I can keep it during this time. And, I had symptoms for 2 days maybe, and then that was it. And I would contribute this breathing exercise to part of, why I had such little trouble with it, and no long COVID issues either. Right. And now, again, this is a one of one, anecdote, and there's a lot of other factors going on there, but I don't think it's something that should be dismissed. And it's, again, because it's been weakened the same way any other muscle or part of your body is weakened, you've got to strengthen it up again consciously and with a consistent effort to be able to heal it again. Otherwise, it's just going to be the way that it is right now for forever. And if you don't like that, then you've got to change something about that.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about more of how the device works and how it helps to actually train our breathing. Now, you mentioned that the 5-5 system. How does the device work to help with that and make it easier, more efficient, simpler for people?
Sure. Well, anyone that's watching, I'll take out the athletic one, the Breather Fit. So this is it in the case. And what you're doing is it's creating a load on your respiration. So on inhale and exhale, it's creating an independent load. There are separate dials on each side, and real basic. And when you're starting, it's funny, a lot of people you'll see, like you said, after like mid 60s, a lot of people never take a full breath again in their life, and they don't even realize it. So you're just slowly suffocating. You think you're dying from something else, but you just continually you're not transmitting and moving that oxygen and CO2 efficiently. So the device, it's a handheld device, hooked in, no drugs. It's just simple. You're just training. It's like a gym for your lungs and your heart. That's what it is. So you put it in your mouth. You usually do 2 to 3 sets in the morning, 2 to 3 sets at night. And if you're on a strength protocol, you do it 6 days a week. If you're on an endurance or sustaining protocol, you do it a lot less. So, but again, if you don't use it, you lose it. So your respiratory muscles do lose their abilities. They get weaker if you're not activating them. So you have to do it. So you put it in your mouth. I'll do a couple breaths so you can hear it. Mm-hmm. And your hand on your belly, and you're focusing on your diaphragm, and that's key. So you're making sure that's moving. And here we go. Real basic. And depending, again, what you're doing it for, strength, recovery, endurance, depends on the protocol. It's a couple minutes morning, couple minutes at night, and it has an effect that we've seen with over 2 million people. It seems simple, but again, it works.
Yeah, it is simple, and the simple things do work, and that's in all of health and fitness, really. Now, it sounds like, and watching you do it, you're breathing in and out pretty forcefully. Is that because that's the athletic device, which I would assume is like a little bit more resistance, and the more non-athletic device is a little bit less, that it wouldn't require that much force? Or is that just how it's supposed to be?
Yeah, we call it in the zone or in the flow. When you're in the zone, you have to feel like you're working out. It has to feel like there's a little bit of pressure being applied, just like lifting weights. It's that same principle. This is a smooth muscle. It's not like you're going to fully load it and go to 100%, which a lot of people do. A lot of athletes think go harder, harder, harder. That is not the case. You want to get to about a 70%, maybe 80% capacity when you're using it, so that when you're done, you felt it, you feel something physically, but you're not where you can't talk. You don't push yourself to that level.
Right. Now, as far as athletics, there have been products in the past, I don't know if they still exist now, we don't need to name any names, that are focused on, you wear it while you exercise. And the thought was that it's making it harder to breathe or simulating altitude or, these kind of claims, which, whatever. But your device wouldn't be something that you would wear while you're training. Now, my understanding, and again, I'm going to kind of get your opinion on this, is like, if you're making your training harder, well, your training is just less effective while you're training your breathing. So it's like, just do your sport practice or your lift or whatever it is, and then train your breathing separately from that, rather than trying to train your breathing. Like you're lifting, you're already not even breathing properly, and then you're going to make it harder to breathe. It's just doing nothing for you and probably doing worse. So does that sort of make sense, and why you designed the device in this way to be used independently of training?
Yeah, well, this is its own form of training, but there are benefits if you have it in your mouth while you're doing certain types of training. So there are some, and next year we're launching a connected device. So as soon as you put it in your mouth, it can predict an exacerbation 14 days before or it helps you train. So are you getting ready for competition, or you're just going to go present, or whatever it is whatever your goal is, it will help you get to that goal. But you think of it this way, it's its own routine, and you need to isolate all those muscles of respiration and posture, and you do that alone. Now, altitude training, the best thing to simulate altitude is actually altitude. You can't just make the blood thinner, right? Because that's what happens. Now, chambers, which we use chambers, so you can get into the chamber and simulate, or get to 20,000 or 15,000 feet. Yes, having it in your mouth does have benefits. There are certain times when you do. And what's interesting, we're going to start launching next month. We're going to have a free class, a free show where we have recognized athletes and people going through this and going over why you should have it in your mouth or not. So this is interesting. You asked this question, is that there are all kinds of different ways to hit whatever it is, the goal that you're trying to hit.
Right. Now, I guess as an extension of this, is there what are the major differences between breathing through your mouth and breathing through your nose? I know this has kind of been like people in the breathwork world have all different opinions and it doesn't matter, or you only breathe through your nose. Like, I've not really heard people that say you should only breathe through your mouth, but where do you stand on it? Like, what's real about whether we should be breathing through our nose or mouth, or does it matter at all?
Yeah, that's a good question. You need to be breathing through your nose. You train for a few minutes twice a day through your mouth, but you cannot train all those muscles through your nose. There's no way you could create the pressure necessary. So it's like the reset breath. That's through your nose. So the benefits of nose breathing are tremendous. It must be done. You must try to do it all the time. Put mouth tape on and try to sleep with your mouth closed. So got to keep that mouth closed as much as you can. But when you're in that few minutes of training during the day, that's with your mouth. That's the only way to trigger and activate properly those muscles. But all the other times during the day, try to be a nose breather as often as you can.
Got it. And that's mostly because you can take in more air through your mouth than through your nose. So when you're training your breathing, you're trying to, maximize your breath volume. I don't know if that's the correct term, but you're trying to maximize your breath. And so you can do that through your mouth much easier than you can through your nose. And I'm sure just like device and, mechanically, it's a lot easier to do something through your mouth than plugging up your nose and doing it that way, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's been something, and I'm not sure if you know this, and we're kind of maybe going a little bit off topic. We don't have to spend any time on it really, but people who breathe through their mouth at night end up having true or false here, end up having like kind of a very small, not very pronounced chin, which leads to then further breathing issues. Is that, and if you don't know the answer, like that's totally fine. But is that something that you guys are kind of focusing on as far as another use for the device at all?
Well, for sleep apnea and snoring, it's been doing that for 44 years. We finished a sleep study 2 years ago. Haven't published yet. I think it's going to get published pretty soon. The sleeping with your mouth open, it's just not good. I mean, I could list off 10 or 15 reasons why you should not do it. But what's interesting using our device is it does strengthen everything around the larynx area. And that, again, that really matters. That helps with the flow and stopping the palate from dropping. So it's really important. But again, mouth breathing at night is not good.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I've not been a mouth breather, but whenever you get a cold or something like that, your nose is stuffed up and you're forced to breathe through your mouth. It's just like for a couple nights, it's never a good feeling. And it's one of these things where I don't think we need a ton of like hard science to figure this out. Like go outside, plug your nose, try breathing through your mouth for a little bit, see how that feels. It feels like crap. And then, don't do that anymore. Like that's the end of I think the science that we need for that.
Well, James Nestor, who wrote the book Breath, everybody should read it. It is the number one book in our field right now. I'm writing a book right now on some other topics, really getting granular at use cases. But his book is amazing. It's a quick read, and he's an investigative reporter. And I just highly recommend everybody read that book if you have not read it yet.
Yeah, I've not heard of it, but I'll put it in the show notes here, and I'll pick it up as well. Yeah, it's just drawing more awareness to this, right? It's like people just really don't understand. And so, what are some of the other maybe more medical implications that the breathwork will have? Well, we talked about blood pressure, but maybe let's go into that a little bit and how does breathing affect your blood pressure? And that's a very general, big question, but like, how are these things related?
Yeah, great. We're starting a study on smoke cessation. We're about to finish a weight loss. We did blood pressure, NATO fighter pilots, Army Rangers, COVID, resilience, on and on. We've got such a vast array of different populations of people that we are studying how they breathe and the impacts of it. So blood pressure, it's interesting when you are, when you're down regulating, well, that affects your blood pressure. So when you are using the device, you can decrease systolic by up to 7% and diastolic blood pressure by 3%. That matters. And your endothelial function improves too. So it is a big impact on blood pressure, and blood pressure is on the rise, actually. Interesting on weight loss. That one's really interesting. It's almost concluded, and I've been seeing some of the results, and we're just focusing on obesity right now because we have to, because it's 30+% of all Americans are now classified as obese. It's probably a little higher.
Yeah.
So they don't exercise. And what's happening is, and the pressure, all that weight, the load on the lungs is tremendous, and on the heart. So they are not taking full breaths. And it is just, it just spirals out of control. So, and they're not working out. So by just doing the RMT, using the device, doing respiratory muscle training, that could be the only form of physical training they're doing that day. And they're doing it twice a day. So the adherence is higher because it's not as difficult to go to the gym or go lift weights. Nothing wrong with it. You got to get up and walk. You got to be moving. But if you're not moving, this is almost like, it's like a shortcut. I don't want to call it a shortcut, but it is a easy way to get yourself having some positive results, some positive movement. And that's what we're seeing, is that it is affecting their quality of life. which affects their happiness and affects depression. And you just feel like, yes, I'm feeling something positive is happening. And then it affects, I don't have any data on this yet, but we do feel it affects their diet, that they're like, let me just eat a little better today because I'm feeling better and I'm feeling some results. I'm losing some weight and my brain is operating better. Dementia is big for us. We're studying that. There's 70 plus forms of dementia. And so many of them are related to oxygen. It's just you're not getting enough or you're not getting in the right places. So when you are moving that oxygen around, it affects it in a positive way.
I think it's actually a much bigger deal than we in the fitness community kind of give it credit, where it doesn't matter. I mean, we say this as a cliche, but then it's always like, oh, go to the gym and, diet and all this stuff. But like, it doesn't actually matter where you start, especially if someone is very obese. Like, you're right that they may not be able to even go for a walk for more than 5 minutes. They probably can't get to the gym. And so starting with a breath exercise, like, are they going to, breathe their way to losing 400 pounds? Like, probably not. But if it's the thing that gets the ball rolling and you start to feel a little bit better, and then so, maybe one day you choose water instead of pop, or the next day you choose a better food instead of a junk food. Like, it's just something that gets the ball rolling, and like positive action breeds more positive action, the same way that negative action breeds more negative action, right? Like, when you're not eating well, you also feel like skipping the gym, and you feel like, being shitty to your spouse and not doing a good job at work. And like, it's just this downward spiral. When you start doing good stuff, you start to do more good stuff. And so if we start that process by breathing, the most fundamental human thing that we have, that's a phenomenal way to do it. And it's like very, very barrier free. There's not really anyone who can say like, I can't be doing this. Even if you have, name your respiratory issue, like, you should definitely be doing this, and you just do it at a scaled down version on a different device, maybe in a different way, maybe, whatever. Speak with your doctor and figure out the best, aspect or the best training methodology, I guess, programming that you can do, and you do it that way. But wherever you start is great, and you can continue to sort of just build from there. And it's just the most fundamental human thing that we have access to is breathing.
100%. You're right on.
This is another thing with yoga, I think, that people miss a lot, especially in like the West, is that yoga is not about stretching and like doing, whatever movements. Like, yoga is about breathing, and it's about meditation, and the exercise physical part of it just facilitates that. But if you go to any good yogi or yoga instructor, they're telling you when to breathe in, when to breathe out, and that's what allows you to get into those movements. We talked about strength training before, and like, yeah, there's a right way to squat, and there's a lot of ways to do it, but everyone breathes a certain way to maximize their performance. So, a lot of people listening to this might not have severe issues or some sort of respiratory issue, but if you can breathe better, you can perform better, kind of in every aspect of your life. Are there any kind of like, this would be, again, very anecdotal and whatever, but people who start with the breath work, and then they have this, massive career transformation. I started making all this money, I started the breath work, and I started doing, do you have any stories like that? I'm sure that they exist, but they would be hard to find, probably.
Well, what's funny, I came from Fortune 100. I've been a serial entrepreneur, and then I went to Fortune 100 world, and the founder of the company, Peggy Nicholson, my mother-in-law, she was selling the company 9 years ago, and I'm like, whoa, you're onto something. This is special what you're doing. Let me buy the company from you. And she sold it to me. So what got me to leave a great career is the stories. I mean, the stories of just, and it goes down to the simple thing of being able to walk, for somebody highly compromised who has COPD, being able to walk to the mailbox, things like that. It changes their life. And then now that we've created this new Breather Recover device, and it was primarily for flu, pneumonia, and COVID recovery, they look at that as hope, because the doctors have given up on people with long COVID, and it's millions. The numbers are scattered. It's 10 to 40% of anyone who's had COVID has some form of long COVID. that still lingers, the weakness, the low energy, all the other symptoms. And, they call it hope, because it's either take more drugs, and pharma's just really, they're just all over us now. It's like, it's crazy how much pharma is changing the landscape of the world, especially in medicine. And no, this is a non-drug solution. And it's at the base, at the core, what we all can do for free is just breathe a little better, breathe more efficiently. And I talk like that, but again, for anyone listening, just do a 5-5 or a 4-4. Just breathe in through your nose for 4 or 5 and breathe out, and just do that for a couple minutes. And do deep breathing from the belly. It's a deep breath from the belly. Just watch what happens just from that simple process. And then there's a real hack that works, like when you're in a when you're about to get in a heated conversation with spouse or kids or at work, or you're really nervous about a presentation about to happen. There's one quick one, and you feel it instantly. It's one breath. It's just a deep inhale through the nose, and then an exhale with a sigh. You gotta activate the vagus nerve. That activates it more. It stimulates that vagus nerve a little bit more, and it really works. It's just, if anyone listening or watching, just do that right now. Watch. There's an instant release in your brain just from, what was that? 4 seconds, 5 seconds.
Yeah, the techniques are so fast and so easily applicable, and like I said before, you don't need a ton of science to figure this stuff out. Like, just do it and see if it works. The harm is zero. The downside is absolutely zero. You waste 4 seconds of your life if it doesn't work, and it will work because it works for everyone. So it's honestly a shame that more people don't engage in some sort of breath work or some sort of breath training. And like you said, I think there's so many different ways to do it. And I don't know that universally, you do a 5-second hold, a 7-second hold, a 10-second hold, you do a longer exhale. I think there's different protocols for different implications. Some will be more excitatory, some will be more restful, some will be more, different things. But for the most part, for general population, just do any of them, find one that feels like it feels good to you, and then go from there.
That's a great comment, because we've experimented with about 50 different ways to do breath work. And at the end of the day, what we found is that because you're just being conscious of it, you've actually made you've gotten halfway there. The consciousness of paying attention to your breath. And if you're doing, the most popular is the box. And that was typically initially for snipers, to learn to focus the gun. But there are so many other techniques, and all this has been done for a couple thousand years, different breathing techniques. So just the conscious effort of focusing on your breath gets you so far, and we've got a bunch of them. I think we land on about 10 or 12 that we promote, because we don't want to have overkill. It is that effort. It's just that conscious effort. So good comment.
Yeah, I've tried very many different breath work, single nostril, left nostril only, this hold ×2, whatever, tons of different things, and they're all good. And if I think the thing is this with a lot of them: if you believe it works enough, then it works. And that almost pains me to say, but if someone says like, hey, this protocol is really good for like this very specific, like it's going to make your squat heavier. If I believe that enough, like it probably will work. Now, whether that's repeatable and scientific, probably not, but it doesn't actually matter because it's helping you and has zero downside. I think the fact is that it will help in some way. And if you want to get into the specifics of like which protocol is better for some very specific situation, then you're blindly throwing darts, and it doesn't really matter. Just if you believe it works, then it works for you. But this is, just comes to the consciousness of it, and it just being the most fundamental human thing that we all have access to at all times. And it's going to help. It's a shame that we don't do this more, because it's so old and none of these concepts are new. Across every single culture, across all of history, they've had various breathwork and meditation practices, and they call it different things and name it different stuff and attach it to religion and whatever. But it's all the same. And now we have to make it in this way, somewhat commercialize it to make it a thing that people will pay attention to, and that's just the way the world works.
Yeah, it's got to mean something. Like I said, when I started, I thought everybody should do it, but it was only people that must do it or need to do it to win. So you either need to win or you're trying to survive. But in the middle is the rest of the human race, and you need a goal. You need there has to be a motivator. So if sleeplessness and if blood pressure and anxiety, if those three things can't touch everybody, that it affects it in a positive way, all three, that's enough for everyone to just take notice and try. And you can drop off the wagon. It happens. I do it. Sometimes I don't use my device for 2-3 months. Sometimes it's from sickness or from I just don't want to use it. I'm like, I'm done with it for now. I'm going to take a break. Same with working out. It's the same thing. So it does affect serious functions in the human body. And it helps with longevity. These things it's not that you want to live to 100, it's you want to have a good 100 years, right?
Right.
And that's what I focus on. I try to help people have the life that they're going to have. Maybe it adds a few years. I'm not going to claim anything like that, but let's make those better years. Better cognition, more energy, that stuff matters. Better sleep.
I think that's a great message, just to hit the rewind button there for quickly, and for people to listen to, who are listening to this who think that Mark's mentioned special operations fighters and professional athletes and Olympics and fighters and all this stuff, and it's like, but I'm not that. I'm just a regular guy. I have a job, I have a family. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a special operations operator. I don't do these like crazy things, but you do have to live your life to the best of your ability and be there for your family and be healthy and all the things. And that's why this stuff is important. So if you've been listening and thinking like, this is just not me, I'm just not that elite athlete. Well, like you are a human, and humans need to breathe no matter what. So that's the part that you really need to listen to there. Mark, one thing that I noticed in looking through your profiles that I really want to ask you about is that, do you believe in 10x thinking? What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
Well, I'm applying it right now at the company. So personally, I'm on this mission to crack the code on low energy, anxiety, and sleeplessness. And with some of the new science that we're developing, just because we have so much data on so many people from our app and from just all these years, is that I'm trying to move the needle there within the next hopefully 6 or 7 years on those three things that matter and affects everybody at some point in your life or your entire life. So I'm trying to do 10x on that. But what I'm learning is that if you want to reach more people, it's got to be easy and low cost, right? So that's if you want to say that's the box I'm in, is that how can we solve this? Because you can solve it really expensively. There's a lot of things out there right now that the elite and the ultra rich do. Everybody's got they've got a cold plunge. They've got all kinds of different types of red light. They've got a hyperbaric chamber. All kinds of things. They've all got it in their gyms now, but those things cost $100,000 to like $200,000-$300,000 to fully equip yourself with all that power. I'm trying to do it at like under $100 or under $150. Can you solve a lot of these things at a low cost, and so you can reach more people and help more people?
Yeah, and again, this is just the fact of the world that we live in now. It's like we can sit here all day and tell people to breathe, and they can do it for free, and they can, try and do it through a straw instead of buying a device, and it might not be as good, but it might be better than what they're doing now. So it's like there's ways to get around this, but it just doesn't sink in for people. So we have to make it bigger than that, but not big enough that it's unattainable or inattainable. And that's the challenge, I think, of all of like what I would classify as natural healthcare and fitness prevention. Is like these things don't have to be expensive, but because they're not, they don't seem so sexy, and that makes them like, just whatever. It's just another thing. Those fitness guys talking about fitness stuff. It's like, yeah, but I don't do this because I do this because it's fun, but I don't only do this because it makes me feel good to talk about it. Like I do this because it works, and then it's up to you whether you want to use any of this stuff or not, right? And that's
most of the disease that we fight now, the chronic disease and the exorbitant healthcare costs, those are all new diseases These are all new ailments from the poor food that they sell us to the drugs they give us and the lifestyle that they ask us to follow, to be mice. Go do this, go get a job, go buy a house, and then die. I mean, we don't have to live life like that, and we shouldn't. So, and take these drugs to quickly fix yourself. No, they don't work. A couple hundred years ago, pharma's new. The Gates and the Rockefellers, I think, and I forgot who. Bill Gates is a lot richer than people think. He comes from a lineage of the richest people on the planet. So this gentleman, this supposed do-gooder, who's trying to poison us right now, through the vaccine, and he's buying up all the farmland he can around the world. This dude is a bad guy. He's an evil person. He's not doing good, everybody. So, his grandparents, whatever, they helped invent pharma because there were natural remedies back in the day. There were tons of them. And the American Indians had straight teeth. They didn't have cavities. They had big jaws, so they didn't have sleep apnea issues. And on, you go back hundreds of years all over the world. Processed food helped us. Our jaws get smaller. Our faces aren't as full and strong looking because we're eating all this mushy food that's really depleting us. Walk into 7-Eleven, that's a death sentence. There's nothing in there you're allowed to eat. It's all bad stuff for you. So, wow, that was pretty dark.
Yeah,
but it's true.
It does get dark quickly, and I think it's also important to go here sometimes because it just draws awareness to the thing, right? A meme that I've seen multiple times, and I think it's great every time, is like, my grocery store has a health food section, and like, so if that's the health food section, like, what is the rest of the food in there? Right?
Yeah.
And it seems kind of silly, but if you actually think about it, it's like, yeah, well, what is it? Like, why is there healthy, well, whatever, and then there's just other stuff? It's like, what is that other stuff, and why are we eating it? Like, it when you actually think about what's happening with just like our lifestyle and the economics of it, and why things are set up the way they are, and who knows why, and who's controlling it, and all, we go down the tinfoil hat conspiracy theory, but like, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, and all the conspiracy stuff. Guess what? They're all true.
Yeah.
They're not conspiracies. It's all true. So, listen, we just have to go back to what used to work thousands of years ago. You just take care of yourself. You study the blue zones. Netflix just has the new series, and some of the blue zones are disappearing because processed food showed up, and the fast culture showed up. Like the one in Japan is disappearing. And these blue zones, where people live past 100 are fading away. And it's common sense. It really is. Just eat what came out of the ground. Try to eat local. Try to do it yourself, and don't add any sugars. Use everything natural that's just there occurring, and have a great social life, right? Have a good family life and friends, and have a purpose, and you'll have a great life.
All the simple things, right?
How do we do it though? Because I have to now go to like 3 more meetings today after this podcast, and then I have to, and all these other things. Our kids are athletes, so being parents of athletes is not anyone who has kids that were athletes or are competitive athletes that have to travel all over the world. That is a tough life. There's a lot of things, so I struggle with catching my breath and actually having downtime, and how do you juggle it all? Well, you know what? It's actually not very easy, but we have to work at it.
Yeah, I think that's the key. We do have to work at it. Like, I'm not willing to go live on, an island in some small village and, not have the internet. And I'm not willing to do that. Now, if I wanted to live the longest, healthiest, life possible, then yeah, maybe that would be the thing to do. But at the expense of what? Not like all my friends and family are not going to also go do that, and all the people that I'm not going to be able to watch sports. I'm not going to be able to do a whole bunch of other things that I enjoy doing, and so we trade that for enjoying like the time that we do have here, right? So I trade a couple of years of my life to enjoy my life, which doesn't seem like that bad of a trade, but there is like a diminishing return to that, right? If I'm going to die at 50 years old because I wanted to do drugs and eat like shit and not exercise, like that's not good. But if I want to die at 100 instead of 110 or 105, and I get to be with my family and do fun things and go on airplanes and go on vacation and do fun stuff, like I'll probably make that trade. I will make that trade, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on, but I think the thing to remember is like we've had healthcare and a way of taking care of human beings for the entirety of human beings, and that's a very long time. Only recently have we had all this like, drugs and new stuff. And so if we think that that is the answer, like maybe we need to just like kind of peel it back a little bit and be like, okay, where can I start at? Breathing. Can we start with, again, the most fundamental human thing that we have is breathing. Can we start there? And then what else can we work on that is just fundamental to being a human being? And then all the other stuff is like, it's not all bad. There's some good that comes from it and whatever, but like apply it when it's necessary, not just all the time.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny. Society's gotten so fast and so crazy, and what's up is down and down and up, that fundamentals mean more than ever. Like I teach my boys just to look people in the eye and shake their hand and ask something about them.
Yeah.
Young adults or children that do that is actually rare. I mean, I grew up with it, but people go like, what? Your kid just said hello to me and they weren't looking at their phone. The basics of society is really being challenged right now, and getting back to the fundamentals. Like we're moving into a new house soon, and it's all about the garden. It's all about the garden that we're going to build, the sustainable, really cool, where everything, and we're teaching our kids, little basics on farming, and it means something. We're teaching them carpentry. And I'm telling my kids, you don't have to go to college. They're very intelligent. They can do whatever they want, but I'm like, hey, you don't have to be in the rat race to choose what. And it's not about what makes you happy. It's about your purpose, right? I mean, happiness can be short lived. It's like, do you have a good purpose in life? And what keeps us centered in this crazy world is the Bible. I mean, we raise our kids in the Bible. It's got all the answers for us, and it works for our family very well. It's been working for thousands of years now. So that's a big thing for us.
I think that's a great point to make, is that you don't have to be rich to be happy. You can be rich and happy. You can be poor and be happy. You can be, the CEO of a international multi-billion trillion dollar company and be happy, or you can be, an employee who works minimum wage and be happy. Like these are not all the same thing. As long as you've got purpose in your life and you're doing something that is meaningful to you and to the people around you, and you're a good person, then you can solve the other issues, right? So, but you got to take care of the basics first, and always.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. I know we could keep going, but we're a little tight on time, so we'll be respectful of that. Where can people find more about you, more about the company? If you want to rattle it off here, I'll throw it all in the show notes, but just let people know.
I'd say the easiest way is you just search for The Breather. That's our main product, just The Breather. If you search, you should find it, or go to pnmedical.com, but it's easiest just search The Breather.
Okay, awesome. I will put that in the show notes. The Breather, PN Medical, Mark Carbone, everybody. Mark, is there any last message that you want to leave the people with here in closing?
I think that, it's great what you do, all the people that you affect and you help. For me, it was just an honor to be on the show with you. So thank you.
I appreciate it very much. And I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your knowledge with us. That's what the whole show is about, is me just being a vessel to hold the space for people like you to say your piece. So I appreciate your time and your efforts as well. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Mark Carbone, PN Medical, search The Breather. You'll find everything you need to know about it. And that's that. Share this episode with whoever needs to hear it, which is everyone, because everyone breathes. So share this with everyone in your life who breathes. 5-star reviews, all that stuff helps the show go a long way, helps the message get out there. I appreciate it very much. Go outside, be a good person. See you next time.